to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
Right? Mm-hmm. They're almost acting as like little nation states.
Yeah.
Japan. So my wife is Japanese and she has good insight into Japan. Japan is very good at basically saying they're going along with international stuff, giving lip service, and then internally not doing a darn thing. So what happened in Japan? Japan said, oh, yeah, we're doing the Great Reset. We're doing the COVID thing. Yeah. But internally, there wasn't any lockdowns. Internally, masks stayed optional. Internally, vaccines were never mandated. And a lot of people take them. There's a culture of taking them. But they also distributed ivermectin broadly. And so what happened when their new PM basically came out and said they're not going to do a lot of these Great Reset things? It wasn't but a week later that he came out and said he won't be signing up for another term, right?
Yeah.
So now you're going to get your installed Japanese PM. Yeah. And because, of course, Japan is owned by the United States. We installed a central bank in Japan after World War II, and we've basically been bleeding their people dry through money printing for decades. So, they don't have, they don't own their future. And so probably what happened there is central banking gave them the call and said, look, this is happening. You're not going to be going up for re-election. And it's really shining a light on which parts of the world actually have autonomy or not.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really scary, especially with the Omicron variant. Like that seems like a play to force Africa into compliance because they have not complied. They have a very low vaccination rate, they have a very low COVID rate, and they have a very low death rate comparatively, from what I understand. And it seems like this Omicron scare, saying it's from South Africa, and then cutting off the ability of African countries outside of South Africa to be able to travel internationally, even though they don't have any COVID problems, is a sign that they're beginning to go after Africa too, which seems to be another bulwark on the international level. The countries within Africa that are just saying, we really don't care, we're not affected.
Well, yeah, I mean, Africa is a huge prize of the Great Reset. I mean, and it's absolutely critical that they bring Africa to heel and incorporate them into this new order. A lot of what monetary reset means is not only do you excavate the productive capital of the last cycle, but you need to launch a bunch of growth stories for the next cycle. And so basically bringing Africa to heel and making way for Belt and Road and making way for expansionism so that China can come in, so that capital markets can be established. That requires order. And so I think part of what's happening is, it's basically central banking, it's monetary imperialism through the device of COVID. And so the reason you see these African premiers being assassinated is because they're basically saying no to this colonization through COVID. And so, this makes me think about El Salvador, right? Like, what can Bukele get away with in terms of saying no to vaccine imperialism? Like, how far can he go? Like, that's a very delicate dance, as far as I can tell. That is the battle. That is the battlefront in this World War III.
Yeah, well, not only that, but he's also coming at the IMF too, I think, openly denying their request to extend a loan and going for the Bitcoin bond, attacking them from multiple angles in that regard.
I think it's exciting. I mean, the Bitcoin bonds that idea is there's a lot of libertarianisms and anarchists who basically say that the state's irredeemable, and so we should just cut directly to the world where you have this kind of extreme freedom, right? But I would say it's better probably not to have a horse in that race and merely say, if a state gets behind Bitcoin, it's a net good on the path that we're all on, right? But I'm not super comfortable with El Salvador being alone this long, right?
Right.
It's a little too long. That's a big matzo ball to have hanging out there. It's a and so I hoped that we would have seen a handful of other LATAM countries join, maybe 1 or 2 European countries defect from the Great Reset. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and then you couple that with how long they've been out there by themselves doing this, with the fact that you have like Christine Lagarde, Hillary Clinton coming out of the woodwork, and others to attack Bitcoin and cryptocurrency specifically, saying that it's going to lead to a destabilization of financial markets and economies, trying to blame the pending financial crisis on Bitcoin, trying to front run that narrative.
And that fits perfectly into the last reset, where basically it was very easy to make a scapegoat of gold and say, oh, you got these hoarders, and sort of say, oh, well, what we need to do is move to a pure fiat, because if there is an escape hatch, people will use it. Which is, you zoom out on that statement alone, that is so telling,
Right.
in terms of his reset. Like what does that mean? Okay, if there is a way to escape the absolute devastation of central powers excavating everyone's future, then people will of course do that. So we need to make sure that they can't do that.
They're essentially coming out and saying options are bad. Like, if you're listening to this at home, like, this was Christine Lagarde who said this, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's basically saying we cannot give people an option to do anything but be cattle herded into this central bank digital currency system that we're trying to erect. Like, just think about that as a human, as an individual, as somebody who has the natural right to autonomy over your body, your ideas, and your choices. They literally want to make sure that you have no choices.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the grift is, so if society were to understand that what reset entails is central banks basically printing the extent of the entire world's purchasing power, concentrating that wealth into the a percent of a percent of a percent of the population, this tiny little power group. And then basically resetting balance sheets of every nation that's on board. What that essentially means is that your family's future is being used to bail out the world, right? And they don't want you to have an escape hatch to get out of that. And now, if people understood that plainly, what would happen is they would revolt, right? And so governments are very smart. They've learned from Julius Caesar and the Romans that you need gladiators and lion fights, and you need things that act as an outlet for people to basically vent their despair and their human emotion to not be a slave, right? So you need an outlet, and that outlet has evolved over time to include things like world war. Because think about it, if you have a world war, instead of being made a slave and your future being stolen and your family's future being stolen, now you're in a shared societal, like this shared responsibility, this shared story, this conflict of good and evil, right? And so it replaces that anger and that revolt. It replaces it with like shared societal responsibility, shared suffering, and then also this gratefulness, right? Because if you make it through the war, it will have all been worth it. All the money printing, all the time theft is justified because you've made it through this big chapter of society together. And so, that makes sense when you look at World War, that those are really dramatizations by the nation state in order to justify all the theft and then all the debt jubilee. You need to justify all that because that's the game we all play. And if it's not fair, if it's rigged, it means that you're a slave. And so these great dramatizations, they hide that fact. And so COVID is, what happens when you ask the question, oh boy, we can't really have nuclear war, right? Nuclear proliferation is too broad. It's too great at this point. The war machine has already chased down, um, you know, war into all the places that are really rough and not sophisticated. So, you have this war in the Middle East. The scope of where it's possible to wage hot war is just getting smaller and smaller. So that wasn't really a viable option for monetary reset this go round. And so a pandemic is a much better model where you don't have to have a hot war, yet all of the West or the whole world is embroiled in a shared saga, a dramatization of conflict. And when you look at it through that lens, it makes a lot more sense why none of the pieces add up and why everyone has a feeling that something weird is going on. What it's a corollary, it's a replacement for hot war. So lockdowns is like sheltering in place. The masks and all these movement rules are kind of like nuclear drills, right? They keep you scared. They keep reminding you that you're in this great conflict in society, and that keeps you distracted. And you need to be distracted when they're stealing your future and they're clawing back your freedoms. And they're, listen, Klaus Schwab on this video just the other day, sort of gleefully talking about how, like, come here and help me shape the future, help me sculpt society. Right? That's what I've been saying for 2 years.
Let's set the narrative for the future. That was the one in the Middle East, correct? I believe it was in Dubai or something like that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, so how does the old banking families of global central banking actually steer society? And the answer is through these NGOs like the World Economic Forum and many others. That's how they interface with the political machine legally. They can do that, and they can do it with money, which of course they can create money. So that's how they steer society, and they're doing it right in front of us. It's not hidden. And so, of course, this is enough to make rational people crazy. This is enough to lock you up.
Well, it is driving me a bit crazy because to me, it's like, all right, I think, and again, I probably am an individual who's more in tune with what's going on than most, and maybe I over-index that and I'm a bit naive and to how everybody else views this stuff. But it seems like they're overextending themselves or moving too fast or being too blatant with this, where it's like, hey, like they're sloppy to an extent. Like, it should be obvious to everybody. But with that being said, now it's like talking to family members and stuff, like, oh, we're going into another lockdown. It's like, what? We're going to get our second booster. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like COVID's not even, like, isn't he, like, yes, people are getting it. Some people are dying, but it's like nowhere near where it was in the summer of 2020, fall of 2020.